Uh, I don't know, it's very tough to say all these things in words.
3 weeks ago, Ferrero was forced to issue a public statement denying fake quotes about a $9 million yacht, 7 months after the split, still cleaning up a story he was never part of. That silence finally broke, and what came out was worse than anyone expected. For months, Ferrero said nothing. Then he sat down inside the academy he built his entire career in. His courts, his life's work, the place he gave everything to, and finally revealed exactly how it ended. The contract arrived on a Saturday, Monday morning deadline. His counteroffer was rejected without one conversation. Alcaraz's family had already decided. The terms were not meant to be accepted, they were meant to make him leave. He did, and Alcaraz's own childhood coach confirmed it publicly. The father makes every decision. Carlos had no say. Ferrero was forced out of the very academy he built, by the family of the player he made great. Subscribe, because what Ferrero revealed next is the part that changes everything. The contract that arrived on Saturday, December 13, 2025 was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. Ferrero had spent 7 years building Carlos Alcaraz from a raw 15-year-old into the most complete player on the planet. 6 Grand Slams, 24 titles, the youngest world number one in ATP history. And when the season ended, when the final had been played in Turin and everyone inside that team believed they were continuing, Alcaraz's camp waited 2 full weeks before sending a single piece of paper. 2 weeks, then a Saturday delivery, then a Monday morning deadline. Ferrero had already mapped out the entire 2026 preseason. He had planned the Australian Open preparation schedule. In his mind, the project was continuing. There was no reason to think otherwise. Alcaraz had just finished the year ranked number 1. He had won 2 Grand Slams. He had gone 71 wins and 9 losses. By any measure, the partnership was working. By every public signal, both men were moving forward together. The contract said something different. Ferrero described the terms as containing conditions he could not accept as a matter of personal values. He was careful with his words in the Marca interview. He did not name Alcaraz's father directly. He did not point fingers publicly, but he confirmed that the sticking points were not financial. Reports in the Spanish press had suggested the contract included a significant salary reduction. Ferrero shut that down. Money was not the issue. The issue was what he described as non-sporting clauses, conditions attached to how the coaching relationship would function, who held authority over decisions, and what Ferrero's role would actually look like going into 2026. He made a counteroffer. It was rejected. No meeting followed, no phone call to work through the differences, no conversation where both sides sat in a room and tried to find middle ground. Ferrero spoke to Carlos directly only once during this entire process, to ask whether Carlos was aware of what was in the contract. Carlos said yes. From that moment, Ferrero dealt only with the people around the player, the people who had written the terms, the people who had decided what those terms would be. Those people were the family. Carlos Santos, the coach who worked with Alcaraz as a child before Ferrero ever entered the picture, went on record with Eurosport Spain and said something that reframed the entire story. He said the father is the one who is really in charge. He said Carlitos had nothing to do with it. He said Carlos would have stayed with Ferrero for as long as Ferrero wanted. Santos was not a hostile source. He was not speaking from bitterness. He was Alcaraz's first coach. He knew this family before any of the Grand Slams, before the fame, before the money. His words carried weight precisely because he had no agenda in saying them. Kiko Navarro, another figure from Alcaraz's earliest coaching years, made the same claim through a post shared publicly on social media. He stated that the decision to remove Ferrero was driven by members of Alcaraz's inner circle, not by Carlos himself. 2 separate coaches, from 2 separate periods of Alcaraz's development, independently pointing at the same thing. To understand why the family wanted Ferrero gone, you have to understand what was being built 60 miles away from his academy in Villena. Ferrero's Equilet Academy sits in a quiet inland town in the province of Alicante. It is where Alcaraz arrived at 15. It is where Ferrero personally chose to coach him, turning down offers from established top 10 players to invest in a teenager nobody outside Spanish junior tennis had heard of. Alcaraz lived on the academy grounds in a prefabricated house that Ferrero himself had previously used. The place shaped him. The courts, the daily routines, the culture Ferrero had built inside those walls. All of it became the foundation of what Alcaraz would become. But Alcaraz was no longer 15. And 60 miles away, in El Palmar, Murcia, the town where Carlos grew up, where his father had been running a tennis operation for over 30 years, something much larger was taking shape. The Carlos Alcaraz Tennis Academy had been growing steadily. By the time the split happened, it had launched camps across the United States, Mexico, New Zealand, and Australia. His father was expanding aggressively, building a global brand on the back of his son's name and reputation. The financial logic behind this was impossible to ignore. In February 2025, Rafael Nadal sold a stake in his academy in Mallorca for 95 million euros to a private equity firm. That single transaction showed the entire tennis world what a Grand Slam champion's name attached to a training facility was actually worth. Alcaraz was younger than Nadal had been at that point. He had more commercially active years ahead of him. His global appeal was arguably broader. The value of having the world number one visibly associated with a family-run academy, training there, promoting it, appearing in its marketing, was not a small number. Ferrero's academy in Villena was a competing interest, not in any hostile sense. Ferrero never described it that way. In his Marca interview, he said he never saw it as a rivalry. He said the academy always had its doors open to Alcaraz, and that training there was never an obligation. But the geography told a story regardless of how diplomatically either side spoke about it. In the months before the split, Alcaraz had become increasingly reluctant to make the one-hour drive to Villena. He was gravitating toward El Palmar. He was training closer to home, closer to family, closer to the operation his father was building around his name. Samuel Lopez had been brought into the team in December 2024, officially as a second coach working alongside Ferrero. Lopez was 55 years old, a co-founder of the Equilite Academy, and a figure with a long history inside Ferrero's own professional world. His arrival was positioned as a way to ease the scheduling pressure on Ferrero and give the team more flexibility across the calendar. What it actually did was provide the family with an alternative. Lopez was described by sources close to the situation as more lenient than Ferrero. He allowed more freedom. He did not push back the way Ferrero did. The family responded warmly to him. Ferrero's knee surgery at the end of 2024 complicated things further. He could not travel to Australia for the start of the 2025 season. Within the Alcaraz camp, this did not sit well. It was the second time Ferrero had been absent during a significant moment. The first had been in February 2023, when he chose not to accompany Alcaraz on the South American clay swing during Carlos's return from his first major injury layoff. He had delegated that responsibility to Antonio Martinez Cascales, a former coach who knew Alcaraz well. The tour had gone well. Alcaraz won in Buenos Aires and reached the final in Rio. But the decision had triggered a heated argument between Ferrero and Alcaraz's father. The argument settled nothing permanently. It planted something that did not go away. By the time the 2025 season was fully underway, the internal temperature had changed. At the Miami Open, when Alcaraz lost shockingly to David Goffin in the opening round, Alcaraz reportedly wanted rest. Ferrero reportedly did not support that request. The tension between a coach who prioritized professional discipline and a camp that increasingly prioritized the player's comfort and freedom was not new. It had been visible in public for anyone paying attention. Alcaraz's Netflix documentary, released during 2025, was called My Way. The title was not accidental. In it, Alcaraz spoke openly about his philosophy. Tennis as joy, competition as entertainment, life as something to be enjoyed rather than sacrificed. Ferrero appeared in the documentary and viewers could see the friction between the two approaches. Alcaraz chafing at certain demands. Ferrero maintaining his position on professionalism and focus. Fernando Meligeni, the former Brazilian professional who had shared the tour with Ferrero during their playing days, gave an interview to Clay magazine that summer and was blunt about what he observed. He said the problem between the player and the coach was about commitment. He said, "My way was not just about nightlife or parties. It was about the schedule, about how much the family would be involved, about who had final authority over how Carlos Alcaraz's career was managed." Meligeni said the battle had been won by "my way." He said the father and the brother were in. He said it in September 2025, 3 months before the split became official. Ferrero saw it too. He had said in a past interview that Alcaraz needed to understand professionalism better. He had spoken about young players losing perspective when success arrives quickly, when they are treated exceptionally everywhere they go and stop seeing reality clearly. He was not speaking abstractly. He was describing something he was watching unfold inside his own team. On December 11, 2025, Ferrero and Lopez were jointly named ATP Coaches of the Year. 6 days later, Alcaraz posted his farewell on social media. The timing was not coincidental. It was the end of the contract cycle. The season was over. The moment had been chosen deliberately. Javier de Diego, the tennis correspondent for Radio Nacional de España, reported that the relationship had broken down in the final days of negotiation. The contract had been presented. Ferrero had pushed back. The camp had not moved. When no agreement was reached, the split was announced within 24 hours. Ferrero gave his first full interview to Marca on December 24, 2025, Christmas Eve. He described the split as a deep wound. He said he had given everything. He said the relationship with Carlos throughout the year had been outstanding, with no arguments at any point. He confirmed he had asked Carlos directly whether he was aware of the contract terms and that Carlos had said yes. He confirmed he had then dealt only with the people he needed to deal with. He confirmed that perhaps, if both sides had sat down properly, something could have been resolved. But they did not sit down. Nobody initiated that conversation. The terms were presented, the deadline passed, and the chapter closed. He said he did not close the door on working with Carlos again. He said definitively shutting that door would not be logical. But he also said every day he still thought about Carlos, that it would be impossible to take on another player with his heart still back in that project. When asked about coaching Jannik Sinner, Alcaraz's primary rival, he said it was not the time to think about that. He needed peace. He needed months, not weeks, to process what had happened. Alcaraz went to the Australian Open in January 2026 under Samuel Lopez. At his pre-tournament press conference, he was asked directly whether his father had influenced the decision. His answer was measured. He said it was something internal within the team, that every move was put on the table together, that the decision had been made collectively. He described the split as a chapter of life that had to end. He said he was grateful for 7 years. He said they remained friends. His words did not match Ferrero's. Ferrero had said he would have liked to continue. Alcaraz described it as something that had to happen. One man was hurt, the other had moved on before the announcement was ever made. Alcaraz won the Australian Open without Ferrero in his corner. He defeated 7 opponents. He completed his career Grand Slam at 22, becoming the youngest man in the Open era to achieve it. He then won in Doha. He started 2026 with a 12-0 record under his new coaching structure. In early February, days after the Melbourne title, fans noticed that Ferrero had unfollowed Alcaraz on Instagram. He had also unfollowed Alcaraz's physio and fitness coaches. He continued to follow Samuel Lopez. When the unfollow was noticed and reported widely, Ferrero addressed it on the Spanish television program El Cafelito in March 2026. He said he did not do it out of spite. He said he needed time to separate himself emotionally. He said it had barely worked because every time he opened Instagram, Alcaraz appeared through tennis accounts and tournament updates regardless. He said he wanted to meet Carlos, hug him, and normalize things between them. He said a conversation still needed to happen. That conversation had not happened publicly as of June 2026. What had happened was the fake quote controversy. In April 2026, veteran Italian coach Riccardo Piatti made a lighthearted comment suggesting that if Ferrero had still been fully in charge, Alcaraz never would have bought a custom 88-foot Sunreef catamaran worth approximately $9 million, drawing a comparison to how Tony Nadal famously restricted a young Rafael Nadal's spending decisions. When Italian outlet Corriere della Sera subsequently asked Ferrero about Piatti's comments, a fabricated quote began circulating online that claimed Ferrero had said Alcaraz did not buy a yacht with him and had connected it to how he raised his own children. Ferrero issued an immediate public statement. He said he had not referred to his children at any point in the interview. He said he had no judgment about Alcaraz's purchase and that buying a yacht was neither good nor bad. He ended the statement with a line that told you everything about how he felt about the media environment surrounding this entire saga. Don't believe everything you read. Verify the information, go to the original sources whenever possible, and draw your own conclusions. A man 9 months removed from the split, still being pulled back into the story, still being misquoted, still having to defend himself in public over a player he no longer coached. In that same period, Ferrero acknowledged in a separate interview that he was open to the idea of coaching Sinner. He said just a few months earlier he would have said no because the wound was still fresh. He said now he felt differently. He said if Darren Cahill were ever to step away and if the conversation arose, he would be willing to explore it. He said Carlos was still ahead in the rivalry in his view, more dynamic, more shots, more ability to disrupt, but that the matches between the two would always be close. Alcaraz, meanwhile, sustained a right wrist injury during his opening match at the Barcelona Open in April 2026. The injury was more serious than initially expected. He withdrew from Barcelona, from Madrid, from Rome, from the French Open, from Wimbledon. His entire clay season and grass season were gone. Spain Davis Cup captain David Ferrer confirmed in early June that Alcaraz's recovery was progressing, but that no return date had been set, and that Carlos would not come back until there was zero risk of aggravating the same injury again. The man Ferrero spent 8 years building was sitting at home. The academy his father had been expanding on the back of his son's name had no active world number one to point to. The coach who had been pushed out of the place he created was playing golf, giving interviews, and slowly finding his way back. What the title of this video promised was that Ferrero finally revealed how the family forced him to leave the academy he built his entire career in. That is exactly what the evidence shows. He did not shout it. He did not name names in a press conference. He said it carefully across multiple interviews in a language of diplomacy that still managed to be completely transparent to anyone paying close attention. The contract was engineered. The timeline was deliberate. The family decided before the document ever arrived. And the academy, the place in Villena where Ferrero had invested his entire coaching identity, became the location where he sat and told the world what it had cost him. He built that place. He brought that player there. He gave that family 8 years of results that transformed their son into a global icon worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And when they decided they no longer needed him, they handed him a piece of paper on a Saturday and took the whole thing back by Monday morning. If this video gave you a perspective you had not fully seen before, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell so you do not miss what comes next, because this story is not finished, and neither is Ferrero.